fitting that we are finally in Venezuela. Venezuela these days is a bit of a mess, but I guess that's frequently true throughout its history. Compared to a lot of their neighbors, they're relatively much better off because of the oil. Still, the president these days is called Chavez. He actually tried to stage a coup, an unsuccessful coup in the early 90s, and went to jail, but then he got elected president, believe it or not. He is, I'm not sure whether he's a madman. He's certainly very leftist, which is okay as long as you're sound, but he's not very sound. The deficit in Venezuela right now is the highest it's been in decades, the government deficit. He's spending him. He can get away with it, at least for the moment, because he's got such a very high price of oil that he has for the last few years, which has been bailing him out. He's been attacking the press. He's threatening to close down the free press. He's putting through a bill to redistribute land. He's essentially taking land away from people and giving it to his friends, in essence. It's starting to cause civil strife as well. President Chavez has threatened to bring out his tanks and his guns against all his enemies because he's becoming much more unpopular. He was elected for a 6-year term, but then he changed the Constitution so that he technically might wind up serving 14 years. I'm sure he might try to change the Constitution again unless that's a coup or unless somehow they get rid of him. I'm told that he's making enemies with the military now, which in South American history has not been a wise thing to do if he wanted to stay in power. It's a shame because, well, Caracas has a spectacular setting. The whole country has a spectacular setting. It's got mountains, it's got the beaches, it's got the Caribbean. And yet somehow or another, in 1991, I was most optimistic about the future. Now I'm less optimistic because for some reason the countries just don't seem to get it organized and do it right. Ecuador's had 7 or 8 presidents in the last 10 years. You see what's happened here in Venezuela. You see Colombia's falling apart with the guerrilla war, which is getting worse, not better. People have always had the image of South America as being unstable and banana republics and all the rest of it. Maybe there's more truth to it than I would like to think or that I did think before. Colombia's a place that has the bad rap for kidnappings, and deservedly so. But the actual statistics are that in the year 2001 to date, more people have been kidnapped in Venezuela than in Colombia. Because Venezuelans say, hey, look what they're doing, look what our friends across the border are doing. All you got to do is kidnap some people and you get very rich. And so they've started doing it too. It hasn't made the press, the Western press, or the U.S. press anyway yet. But it's happening here very, I mean, it's a big business, big movement. Magnificent scenery, magnificent people, magnificent resources. And yet somehow or another it's hard finding a sea of stability. Bolivia, which has been a basket case for decades, and Chile, which seem to be the two that have the most grounds for optimism going forward. Peru too.